I slid into the passenger seat of my husband's car, the familiar scent of his cologne now feeling like a lie. I was looking for a napkin, but my fingers closed around something else, a cold, plastic tube tucked in the glove compartment, a tube of personal lubricant, half used. My blood turned to ice. I didn't say a word. I simply slipped it into my pocket and, the next day, secretly replaced it with a tube of industrial-strength superglue. What happened next forced our neighbors to make an emergency call to the fire department. I'm so glad you're here. If you're watching this, please like and subscribe to my channel, and tell me in the comments which city you're listening from. I want to know how far my story of revenge has traveled. The silence in our house was as thick and suffocating as a morning fog. An unwelcome guest that had long overstayed its welcome. The old clock on the wall, a wedding gift from my late mother, ticked with a relentless, accusatory rhythm. Each talk was a painful reminder of the life I was beginning to suspect was a beautiful, meticulously crafted lie. My husband, Julian, had just returned from another business dinner. He looked not just exhausted, but haunted, as if he carried the weight of a secret too heavy to bear. Deep lines of fatigue and something that looked suspiciously like guilt were etched around his eyes. He tossed his jacket onto the sofa with a performative weariness, loosened his tie as if it were a noose, and collapsed into bed without even bothering to shower. The familiar scent of his expensive cologne hung in the air, but it was now tainted by a new, alien fragrance, a sweet, floral perfume that felt like a brazen intrusion, a confession whispered from a life I didn't know he was living. Minutes later, the gentle hum of his snoring filled the house, a sound that once brought me comfort, but now felt like a mocking lullaby. A lullaby for a fool. I moved with the quiet, practiced grace of a wife of 40 years, tidying the mess he'd left behind, his jacket, his wallet, his cell phone. The phone screen glowed, a single, unread email shining like a sinister omen. I frowned. Julian never used email. He always said, "Juliet, all this tech stuff is too complicated. I'd rather just make a call," but there it was. A digital ghost from a life I didn't know he was leading. A morbid curiosity, both wrong and necessary, made me tap the screen. The message was short, a handful of words that shattered my world into a million jagged pieces. "You were incredible tonight, Dad." It was followed by a single, red heart, a symbol of affection that pierced my own with a cold, sharp ache. I froze, as if I'd been physically slapped. "Dad." The word echoed in the silent room. Who was calling him that? And in such an intimate, affectionate tone? My thumb trembled as I swiped, searching for more clues, but there was nothing. Just a jumble of meaningless characters for an email address. A shiver ran through me, a profound, bone-deep dread seeping in like a cold wind through a crack in the door of my life. I glanced at the bedroom. Julian had turned over, his face still and peaceful in sleep, a stark, infuriating contrast to the storm now raging inside me. My heart pounded like a thief's. I put the phone back, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I continued my robotic cleaning, gathering his clothes for the laundry. As I checked his pants pockets, my fingers brushed against a folded piece of paper, crisp and new. It was a receipt from a fancy steakhouse in San Antonio, dated that very night. San Antonio? He'd told me he was meeting partners in Dallas. A bitter laugh escaped my lips. Julian hated driving to Dallas. San Antonio was where his mother had lived, he had fond memories there. The receipt was for a party of two. A bottle of expensive Cabernet Sauvignon, the same wine he'd bought for our 10th anniversary, and filet mignon. I tried to remember the last time Julian had taken me to a place like that. A decade ago, maybe, when I'd opened my first bakery. The memory, once cherished, now felt like a faded photograph in a scrapbook of deceit. With a silent, grim resolve, I took out my own phone and snapped pictures of the receipt and the email. A wife's intuition, sharpened by 40 years, is a deep, primal knowing. Something was terribly wrong, and I had to find out what. My hands trembled not just with anger, but with a deep, existential dread. I felt like I was standing on a cliff, about to witness the spectacular collapse of my entire life. I went to the garage. Julian's old SUV was still warm, the air thick with the smell of gasoline and that faint, sweet perfume. I opened the door, a cold dread gripping my stomach. I turned on my phone's flashlight, searching the driver's seat, nothing but loose change and an empty water bottle, but when I reached into the glove box, my fingers brushed against something plastic and slippery. I pulled it out, and my heart stuttered to a halt, a tube of personal lubricant, used, with a dried residue on the cap. A sticky, damning piece of evidence. Julian and I hadn't been intimate in years. He always claimed age had sapped his desire. So what was this for? I stood frozen in the dark garage, staring at it as if it were a coiled serpent. I placed it back exactly where I found it, wiped my hands raw with a napkin, and continued my search. Under the back seat, I found crumpled napkins soaked in that same, alien floral perfume. It was a loud, vulgar shout of infidelity in the quiet sanctuary of our home. I documented everything with my phone, each click of the camera sealing another piece of my breaking heart. Back inside, I picked up Julian's phone again. I was now certain he was cheating. His messages were pristine, only dry work chats. His inbox was empty, save for that one strange email. It was all too clean, suspiciously so, as if he were a master of digital deception. My rage solidified into a cold, hard stone in my chest. And new, more dangerous emotions stirred, a desire for the unvarnished truth, no matter the cost. The next morning, I was a ghost in my own kitchen, the images of the lubricant, the receipt, and that email playing on a venomous loop in my mind. I made breakfast, eggs, toast, strong black coffee, my hands moving while my soul screamed. Julian came down, a mess of sleep-tousled hair and groggy eyes. "I have an important meeting today," he said, not meeting my gaze. "I'll be home late." He was so practiced, so casual. It made my blood run cold. I nodded, a strained smile on my face. "All right. Be careful." He gave me a pat on the shoulder, a hollow, afterthought of a gesture, and left. The door clicked shut, leaving me in a silence that was now deafening. I couldn't just sit with my theories. I needed evidence. I called an old friend, Mrs. Miller, who once mentioned a discreet private investigator. "Juliet, if you ever need it," she'd said. I never thought I would. An hour later, I was in a secluded corner of a downtown cafe, the aroma of roasted coffee feeling foreign and strange. Thomas, the pie, was a stocky, middle-aged man with philosophical eyes that seemed to see right through me. I handed him a flash drive. "This is all I have," I said, my voice shaky. "I think my husband is cheating on me." The words tasted like hash. He reviewed the images impassively. "I'll start following Mr. Roberts this afternoon. I'll be in touch." I left the cafe, walking through the crowd but feeling a loneliness so profound it was a physical ache. 40 years of marriage, a lifetime of trust, crumbling beneath my feet. I was hiring a stranger to follow my own husband. The irony was a bitter pill. That night, as I sat in my bakery surrounded by the comforting scents of yeast and flour, my phone vibrated. A message from Thomas. My heart hammered against my ribs, the blood roaring in my ears. It was a photo. Julian, in his light blue shirt, entering a fancy restaurant, holding hands with a woman. I zoomed in. My heart stopped. It was Allison. My daughter-in-law. She was wearing a tight black dress, heavy makeup, and crimson lipstick. They didn't look like in-laws, they looked like lovers, their bodies angled toward each other in a shared, secret world. I sank into my chair, my hand trembling. Allison. At family gatherings, they were distant, barely speaking. It had all been a masterful act, a performance for a fool. More photos arrived. A candlelit table, Allison leaning in, smiling. Julian toasting her with a gaze of tender adoration, a look I hadn't seen directed at me in decades. Then, a video. Allison whispering in his ear, making him laugh, a sound that was a stranger to me. They left the restaurant, Julian opening the car door for her as if she were his queen. I replayed it, a self-inflicted torture, each viewing another stab to the heart. Allison, whom I had taught to make our family's traditional flan. Julian, the man I had built a life with, what were they doing behind my back? Behind my son Daniel's back? I saved everything, my hands working on autopilot while my mind churned in chaos. I didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was a mountain I could not ignore. The next morning, another message from Thomas. Sending more evidence. The first photo showed Julian leaving a law office. By his side was Allison in a beige office dress and oversized sunglasses, a pathetic attempt at disguise. They walked close, their intimacy undeniable. The next photo was of them standing before a four-star hotel, its glass doors gleaming. They looked natural, comfortable, a part of a world from which I was excluded. Then, a video. From a distance, I saw them on a third-floor balcony. Julian's arm was around her waist, her head rested on his shoulder. And then, a quick, unmistakable kiss. It was brief, but it incinerated the last spark of hope I had. I slumped in my chair, clutching the table edge. Thomas wrote, they rented the room for the afternoon. I'll keep watching. Just hours earlier, Julian had texted me, Juliet, won't be home tonight. Meeting a potential partner from out of town. Get some rest. The tone was sweet, caring. A well-constructed lie. His partner wasn't out of town. She was in a four-star hotel with him. I saved every file, each save click feeling like the hammer of a judge's gavel. Julian's tender gaze toward Allison was a relic from our past, a ghost that now haunted me. I remembered family dinners, Allison sitting far from Julian, looking at him with what I thought was disdain. Daniel would joke, Mom, I think Allison can't stand Dad. It had all been a farce, a carefully choreographed dance of deception. I felt like the world's greatest fool. That night, I returned to the house that was no longer a home. I printed all the evidence, the lawyer's office, the hotel, the balcony kiss, and hid the envelope beneath old family photos. I looked at a picture of the four of us, all smiling, and wanted to tear it to shreds. The next morning, Julian stumbled in, reeking of alcohol. The partner was difficult, he slurred. I'm dead tired, rest, I replied, my voice a monotone. You have to work tomorrow, he nodded, patted my shoulder, and dragged himself to bed, soon snoring peacefully as if he held no dark secrets. When I was sure he was asleep, Thomas called, his voice a whisper. Mrs. Roberts, I recorded their conversation in the hotel parking lot. Sending it now, an audio file appeared. I put on my headphones and pressed play. Allison's voice, cold and ambitious, Dad, hurry up with that fake contract. I want that whole chain of stores. I want that old hag out of the house, a blow to my chest. They weren't just cheating, they were planning to steal everything. Julian's voice, confident, don't worry. Juliet doesn't know anything. She trusts me too much. It was a knife twisting in my heart. My bakery chain, built on my sweat, my tears, my sleepless nights. Julian had never once gotten his hands dirty. And now he and Allison wanted to take it all, to evict me from my own life. I copied the audio, my composure a thin veneer over a boiling rage. The next batch of photos showed them in his car, a thick stack of papers between them. Allison marked a document with a red pen while Julian nodded in agreement. Thomas wrote, they plan to use a notary contact for the transfer. I was looking at a conspiracy to dismantle my life, piece by piece. A regular customer, Mrs. Peterson, came in. Juliet, your chain is expanding. I'm so proud of you. I forced a smile. Thank you. I'm doing my best. Inside, I was a wreck. That night at dinner, under the yellow kitchen light, Julian tested the waters. Juliet, I have to sign some important business papers this week. You should look them over. I picked at my food. Yes, I'll look later. I'm tired now, he nodded, sipping his wine, a predator waiting to strike. Later, drunk, He left his car keys on the nightstand. I stared at them, my heart pounding. This was my chance. I took the keys and went to the garage. The night was silent, the crickets a soundtrack to my fury. I opened the glove box. There it was, the lubricant, a monument to their infidelity. In the kitchen, I washed my hands with lemon soap, scrubbing away the feeling of his betrayal. Then, I opened the tool drawer and took out a tube of industrial superglue. With meticulous care, I emptied the lubricant and filled the tube with glue. I wiped the nozzle clean. It was a perfect replica. I placed it back in the glove box, a silent, ticking bomb of my own design. The next morning, I announced, "Julian, I have to travel to Nashville tomorrow to sign a contract. I'll be home late." A spark of relief flashed in his eyes. "A big contract? Don't worry. I'll handle things here." He wanted me gone. That night, I pretended to sleep. I heard him get up, his phone glowing. I followed, hiding behind the living room curtain. He was on the phone, his voice low. "Yes, come to the house tomorrow. Juliet's leaving town." Finally, we can relax. I returned to the bedroom, my blood boiling. They were going to defile my home. I took Daniel's old college recorder, checked the batteries, and hid it behind the bookshelf next to our bed, covered by a framed family photo. The ultimate irony. I lay awake, my eyes open in the darkness, more alert than I had been in years. At 5 a.m., I set the final piece of my plan. In the kitchen, I rigged a simple smoke trap, a skillet of oil on the stove, a string tied to the igniter, run to the window. A pull from a distance would create thick, black smoke. I put on my jacket, grabbed my purse, and woke Julian. "I'm leaving for the bus station, be careful," he mumbled, rolling over. I went across the street to Mrs. Peterson's house. "Can I stay here for a few hours?" I asked. "I need to watch my house." She poured me coffee without a word, and we sat by the window. At 10 a.m., a taxi arrived. Allison stepped out in a floral dress and sunglasses. Julian hurried her inside. "It's time," I murmured, and opened the audio app on my phone. Through my headphones, I heard their voices, their laughter, the creak of the bed. Then, Allison's panicked scream. "What the hell is this?" "We're stuck," Julian's growled response. "Shut up. Let me see," I smiled, "a cold, hard thing." I tapped my phone, activating the smoke trap. The string pulled. The oil ignited. Black smoke billowed from the kitchen window. Mrs. Peterson gasped. "Juliet, your house is on fire." Neighbors spilled into the street, shouting. Mr. Miller called the fire department. In my headphones, chaos. "Julian, do something." "I can't move." "Don't scream." "I'm trying." The superglue had done its job. The fire truck arrived, sirens wailing. My son, Daniel, in his chief's uniform, jumped out, his face a mask of professional concern. "Get the equipment ready. There might be people inside." My heart ached for him. He led his team, breaking down the front door with a sledgehammer. The sound of splintering wood was the sound of my old life ending. I listened as Daniel entered the bedroom. His voice faltered. What is this?" a firefighter muttered. "Oh my God." Another stifled a nervous laugh. Silence. Daniel roared, a cry of pure, personal pain. The humiliation was now public. Neighbors crowded the doorway, pointing, whispering. Julian and his daughter-in-law. Someone shouted. Mrs. Peterson began recording on her phone. Daniel's team wrapped Julian and Allison in sheets and carried them out on stretchers, their bodies still fused in their shame. The crowd erupted in revulsion and mockery. What a disgrace. I crossed the street, pretending to have just arrived. Daniel stood frozen in the yard, pale as a ghost. I went to the hospital with Mrs. Peterson. Hours later, a doctor emerged. We managed to separate them. No serious damage, just some skin ointment. "Thank you," I said, my voice trembling perfectly. At the nurse's station, I was given 2 tubes of ointment. The moment she turned, I swapped them for the tubes of thick, hot mustard I had in my purse. I entered their room, placing the tubes on the bedside table. Julian, Allison, are you okay? Allison couldn't look at me. Julian stammered, Juliet, I can explain, I didn't let him. I turned and left. Minutes later, screams echoed down the hall. It burns. My skin is on fire. Julian was cursing. What the hell is this? The hallway buzzed with onlookers. They deserve it, an old woman whispered. The public humiliation was complete. Mrs. Peterson's video was already spreading online. I had called Daniel earlier, asking him to bring the envelope of evidence and the divorce papers I had prepared. He entered their room, his gaze hollow, and handed me the folder. I placed the documents before Julian. My voice was ice. 40 years of marriage end here. Sign these and disappear from my son's life and mine. Allison collapsed, sobbing, begging Daniel for forgiveness. He looked at her, his eyes hard as stone, and walked away without a word. Julian tried to grab my hand. Juliet, please, I pulled away. You chose this path. I found Daniel in the hallway, his head in his hands. Mom, he whispered, broken. Why did it have to be Dad? Why her? I had no answer. I just held him, sharing the devastating weight of their betrayal. In the weeks that followed, my bakery thrived. The bell never stopped ringing. Customers called me strong, a survivor. But only I knew that strength was forged in the crucible of a broken heart. Daniel moved in with me. He was quieter, his laughter gone, but he helped me run the business. We found a new rhythm, a quiet solidarity in our shared loss. One night, he asked, Mom, can you make me some flan this weekend? It was the first smile I'd seen from him since the scandal. All right, I said, my heart lifting slightly. But you have to help me stir the caramel. He nodded. And in that simple moment, I felt a fragile sense of peace begin to bloom. I had lost the family I thought I had. But I had saved my son, my business, and myself. Julian and Allison had lost everything, their honor, their relationships, their ill-gotten plans. The price was immense, but I was still standing. And I was finally free. Did you like my story? Let me know which city you're listening from in the comments. If you'd like to support me in bringing more stories like this, you can send a super thanks. I'm so grateful for your support. There are more life stories on my channel. You can find them on